Well, we're focusing on election-related matters this morning as a result of what you heard the chairman of INEC say only recently as a result of the, in the course of that defense of the budget, which is ongoing for several MDAs at the moment. So we've got two gentlemen in the studios here with us to take a look at that and more. Well, first we've got on my immediate right, Chief Jeff Ojinika, who is the immediate past chairman, national deputy chairman of IPAC. And then we also have Honorable Uzoma Abonsa, who is a former chairman, House Committee on Public Petition. Gentlemen, thank you for coming on this morning.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, Chief, I know that some time ago there was several conversation about what do we need to do to ensure that we get elections a lot better. The National Assembly, I believe, will be looking into some of these things if they haven't already. But it appears as though there seems to be some consensus in many quarters about, yes, we need to do something about getting elections better. But about this position, this latest position of INEC, about us having particularly electoral courts amongst others, because he says INEC is burdened with extraneous matters. Do you think this is the way to go?
I think the issue of specialized courts for election has always been on the front burner from the OIS report. The OIS report recommended setting up of electoral courts. And ever since then, the matter has been on the public domain. There have been some people who criticize it, that taking into consideration our national budget, that a lot of our money go into recurrent expenditure vis-a-vis the capital expenditure, that is telling on the bureaucracy, that the bureaucracy of Nigeria is becoming so much unwieldy that the masses have really nothing much to show for the money that comes in from our oil. So on that side, some people suggest that the best thing is to improve on our legal system as we currently have it. But to say whether we'll have a specialized court or not, I think INEC needs to do the most important thing that they ought to do. Those they are commanded, have they been able to discharge that to the best of their ability?
Which one is the most important thing?
Conducting election in terms of the electoral process itself, where the Electoral Act complied with substantially in the last electoral process. There were a whole lot of issues that we had to argue with INEC, a lot of suggestions that we made then. And at the end of time, when election finished, we didn't get to, most of the promises made were not fulfilled completely. In the last election, we still hear cases of people, falling with the election results.
Yeah, but pardon me jumping, but if people think that they will get away with certain things, isn't that why they will feel confident about disrupting the process?
Yes, I don't think our present court system, the way it is, if improved upon, can still serve the same purpose. You can see most cases in the country today suffering delays, except for electoral cases. The electoral cases have been given first line in all courts in Nigeria today. And they have also tried to set a timeline for all election cases to be had. So as a result of that, the courts have been busy, even over the weekends, irrespective of date or time. They've been attending to those cases, and I've not seen any case that has elapsed for the time being. That's not a single one of the retinue of cases. So meaning that if we improve our legal system, make it more functional than it is present, it can cope with the process. I say this based on the fact that the major problem of the country is not just election alone.
Okay.
The infrastructure is almost at a 0 point.
We'll come to some of those as well as we progress. But Honorable, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I think what we need to get is a sound electoral law. We need to modify and adjust our laws. I do not think that because of the not having electoral courts, we're suffering. We're not getting it right, first of all. The Election Petition Tribunal has been set up to look at the conduct of the election when you feel aggrieved. And in most cases, they overturn elections, they nullify some based on some things that were not right. And if they recommend there that such people should be prosecuted who caused the falsification or otherwise, what are we talking about? He suggested having electoral courts to deal with those who fiddle with results. Are they not criminal offenses? And if they are criminal offenses, why would they not go to regular courts? I agree with him when he says that we should correct or improve on our justice system, and I think they can handle it. May I ask, are we going to have a specialized court in everything? Some argue that EFCC needed a court to do financial fraud and all whatnot. Why is it in Nigeria we duplicate everything? We have our police with traffic division, now we have also EFCC. I'm sorry, we have a FRS doing water safety, doing the same work. I think that the thing to do is to organize our criminal system, judicial system, so that we can deliver, like he said, those who attend to election petition, are they not doing well? Are they not delivering? So we can also give a selected hearing on such matters. They can be given preference. But setting up a court, let me also ask, are you going to have electoral courts in all the states? I believe so. Because if there's electoral offense arising from Abia State, for example, are you going to bring it to Abuja?
A question of jurisdiction will then come in.
Jurisdiction will come in.
You know, but electoral courts, from what I understand, won't be just about the result of elections. For instance, electoral offenders.
Electoral offenders,
those are key issues. But we also have had that conversation previously where we did ask them, who is responsible for pointing out when or what is an electoral offense when it's committed in the field? So there was that back and forth about, well, INEC, all police. So has that been properly defined from your perspective?
And that's why I'm thinking that the election petitions holding on should be able to say, from our findings, you did this. Therefore,
election tribunals?
Yes, of course. As they hear the matter.
No, but at the moment, it's not in their jurisdiction.
That's what I'm saying. You can add it there and say, as they hear the matter, they'll be able to figure out who are the offenders and recommend for prosecution. The police takes over from there, and from there go to court. But if you now say, who will point out, is it the INEC who is involved, or is it the policeman who is involved? I mean, all are involved in the system because of the porous law we have, including the candidates, everybody. So the man who is deciding the election petition should be able to say, this result is not genuine, so who brought it up? From the unit.
How about, cases that happen before the elections?
Like?
The kind of litigations that sometimes stall elections, this candidate is qualified, this candidate is
pre-election
not
matters.
That's pre-election matters.
Yeah,
that's not criminal in nature.
No.
It's not criminal in nature. If, for example, I said...
It also involves INEC.
Involves INEC?
Sometimes, because INEC has to wait for those litigations to be over before it puts the person's name.
Of course.
Isn't this part of the cumbersome nature of elections that INEC and so many other people are?
That cannot fall into electoral costs per se because they are purely civil. If I'm saying, for example, you are not fit, you're underage, you're not fit to contest this election, for example, why will I go to a specialized court? I'll go to a normal court. It's for you to prove your age or whatever and so on. Until that is determined, INEC will wait and find out who is the real candidate. That is not criminal in nature. What we are talking and what you're saying is the criminal aspect of elections. Must we have a special court? I do not think that we need it. But anything we can do to get the elections right should be encouraged. But we must not increase the cost of running the government. Let me give you an example. Are you going to have these costs in all the local governments or in all the states or where, how? It will be more than even the normal costs.
The major argument both of you have made seems to be on cost. The fact that could be duplicating the services that courts render. Am I getting both of you right?
That's wonderful.
Yeah, but some people will say that perhaps a little creativity might help in this instance. We looked at the nature of the offenses, because if we're saying that our courts, if they're efficient, can handle it, let's look at the number of electoral offenders that INEC said, it had to deal with, say, in the last elections. And we're looking in the region of, say, 80,000 people. Isn't that already another burden on the judicial system as we currently have it? Some people will say, what about if we thought of mobile courts? What about courts constituted for, say, that day and the next day, like we usually have for, say, sanitation offenses or thereabout? Wouldn't those kinds of courts or those kinds of solutions help in this instance?
Well, if you ask me, I feel that the problem is not really that of the courts. I think our election has to be owned by citizens. There have to be citizen participation. I expect that at the end of this electoral process and at the end of these judicial processes and tribunals, that the citizens can on their own apply, lawyers can apply to prosecute cases. Like we have cases in my state, in Imo State, that we will expect that citizens of the state should apply to possibly to be given opportunity to prosecute such matters. People forged their booth and election results and went to tribunal with it, and tribunal frowned at such and described such as a forged and fictitious result.
How will people prosecute if they will not?
If
They
need to apply for the leave of the Attorney General of the state to be allowed. You know, when I mean independent prosecutors, people can on their own apply to prosecute on behalf of the government such cases. So that at the end of time, we had cases where electoral officers were saying that they were forced under duress to vote, and at the end of time. So such are
How would
issues
that work? Let's be more practical now. Because you talked about people applying to who? The Attorney General, of the Federation or of the state?
Both.
Because, you know, if indeed, I mean, let's look at it.
No, if it is for federal offenses like the election, which, you know, INEC has to be involved. If you are in that case, it is Attorney General of the Federation that should give the leave for you to.
I'm looking at an instance where, you know, somebody says, oh, they try to force me under duress to announce something, which may be, I mean, the post of governors or governorship is contested, isn't it? Assuming something was done in favor of the incumbent, so to speak, and the Attorney General is appointed by the governor, how is that going to work for independent prosecutors?
Well, once the law authorizes that such a thing, you can go to the court and get another mandamus to compel the Attorney General to do the needful. He should rise above the law.
He can still enter a nulli in the process. He can still enter a nulli. They still have that right to do that, so it defeats the purpose.
Well, but if you also compare that of the incumbent, it might just be a minority case. When I mean the number of people involved in such electoral offenses compared to just having one incumbent. But I think we'll just have to start somewhere. It's something that the citizens will own up this electoral process, and they can take it up in terms of citizens' participation, so that you know that these electoral offenses will not just end at the day of election.
Some people argue that the citizens are already participating. After all, they are the ones who vote, but the question is, how are they participating? And are they able to differentiate right from wrong? I mean, when we talk about vote buying, for instance, it is the people who want to be voted for and the citizens who collude to do this vote buying. And some people don't see it as wrong. But if the law says this is wrong and this should not be tolerated, the question is, how do we ensure that that is enforced? How do we ensure that there are consequences for things like that on election day?
Well, what I think, and I still have to say it, our judicial system have not operated at the optimal level, meaning that there's a lot of room for improvement. And if we also improve the process, it will also help. A situation, I think, INEC has not done so much in terms of trying to put up infrastructure that's needed for the very functioning electoral process. We're expecting that by now, by the next election, we should be going into electronic voting. All the necessary things, infrastructure that you need to put in place for us to be able to do that, so that you eliminate a lot of human control over a whole lot of things.
But that's
and then you also eliminate a whole lot of handing of papers. We're hoping that in no distant time that all the electoral booths where you conduct this election, there will be CCTV cameras there, so that issue of violence around such election areas will be completely eliminated.
Wow, that's going to be additional costs?
No, this is but no, what does it, as of now, what does it, anything that it takes for us to secure our electoral process?
Honorable, I know that there's defense of the budget for INEC at the moment going on, and so how is this going to fit into the scheme if we're to do it in the
I
future?
do not think fund is INEC's problem. They are well funded. But what we're talking about, court and non-court or whatever, I still maintain that we must start somewhere. At the point where an election tribunal will make a pronouncement nullifying an election, there must be a reason they will give. They should be able to find out who caused that and recommend prosecution. For example, they will come up and say, this result is forged. Or, like my colleague said, somebody will say, I'm being forced to declare. He should mention who forged them and should be prosecuted. We'll start somewhere.
So that's a function for INEC.
Not function for INEC. The court that is being set up, election petition court, while doing the matter, should be able to identify the criminal, so to say.
But who will identify the criminal?
No. The court system. If I have taken my opponent to election petition, as we are doing the matter, they first come up upon the court is based to nullify the elections. They base on issues. They find some facts. Can they recommend alongside prosecute whosoever forged this result?
But some people say that it remains a recommendation.
No, not a recommendation.
No. Who's going to take it up? Because the court cannot on its own, begin to prosecute people.
Who recommends prosecution of a criminal, an armed robber? Who recommends that? Who recommends that someone who cheated should be prosecuted?
Yeah, but that's from the source, not as a result of an election petition case. In those cases,
that's what I'm saying. If we really want to improve the system, we'll say that don't just only nullify elections, go to the root what it happened. That's one of the areas. I'm not averse completely setting up a different course, but it will also end up like our regular course. We should, like you said, improve our normal courts. Get more judges, if that may be the case, to work there. If they have 80,000 electoral offenders, what's the percentage of those who are INEC persons?
If we could improve our regular courts,
yes.
Why do we have to have election petition tribunal, especially, and then pay all that attention to this?
One, you can say it was a specialized matter with a time frame.
Isn't it the same thing INEC is saying here?
Yeah, what INEC is saying, in a criminal matter, you must observe all the rules. INEC petition is not done, election petition is not done strictly on a criminal procedural basis, where you must prove beyond reasonable point. It's done on as a civil matter. That's why when you allege fraud, at times they'll tell you didn't prove it. Lawyers may choose to say malpractice. If you talk about fraud, they say what police report, what happened and all whatnot. But upon doing that matter, they discover fraud. They recommend further investigation and prosecution. That's what I'm saying. Rather than starting all over with a specialized court. It could be doable, but in the interim, that's not what we should do. We should be talking about improving our court systems, making sure that the way they handle electoral matter. For example, I also know that they're trying to set up or give some preference to cases of EFCC and all whatnot. You can put that on front burner. Say, court, fast track such matters.
In which way do you think political parties can aid or hinder this suggestion?
How do you hinder it? Of course, they will try to. Nigerians will try to do things that will shortcut it. They will. But
Nigerians or politicians?
Nigerians, you're part of it. Nigerians,
I'm not a politician.
Well, I said Nigerians, you're part of Nigerians, like the society, the citizens. So we'll try to do something that will shortcut it.
Doesn't that mean that we haven't all quite bought into the Nigerian ideal of a better Nigeria, a better electoral process, if the plan is to
that is what we are all fighting for. For example, what reason for not assenting to the act was amended? Electronic voting will reduce it, even though you also take consider of the literacy level and all whatnot and power and all whatnot to run the electronic gadgets. But that's the only thing that will guarantee less human handling of materials.
Chief Ojinka.
How do you,
go on, please.
How do you hope that it will work? I mean, what are we envisaging will happen in the event that we introduce electronic voting? How do we see it playing out?
For example, in the last election, INEC got money to provide generators, card readers, everything for all the units, even a server. So it transmit directly. It didn't work. It was a big issue. It didn't work. So if they had used card reader to do accreditation, that would determine how many persons came to vote, how many votes, valid and otherwise.
That is back to the National Assembly, because That is not law yet. They can't.
Because it was not assented to. We'll try and represent it again. We'll try and do the same again. Maybe look at the great area that caused the problem of not being assented and present again. We're already working on that. So we're doing our own bit to make sure we have genuine, credible elections.
The thing is this, because I'm wondering, are we still going to go through the process of collating at the local government level, collating at the state level, collating at the federal government level before results are announced? Or are we looking at a system? Will the laws be making provisions for a system where INEC will compulsorily have to tally at the center when votes, or will have to tally directly as votes are being cast? Is that what you envisage
That is
will
the
happen?
proper thing to be done. As you finish at the ward unit level,
Yes.
the unit publishes the result. The ward level collates and done the result. The LG collates and done the result. State and then federal, automatically. For example, you do things and send to Lagos. From Lagos you send to Abuja and all over. I mean, the whole states are watching you now. From one point, why can't INEC do that?
The question I'm asking is whether the laws will take that into cognizance, because if they don't, INEC might still claim that it is, hand-tied, and if
That is what we are
declaring
saying.
different figures and they are not under any compulsion to declare a figure that is collated at the center until all the votes come in, aren't we back to square one?
In the last electoral amendment, that was taken care of. Say, use electronic, declare there and then. But because it was not assented to, the argument became during the Supreme Court that electronic voting is not part of our electoral system.
There are some considerations that other people have. Chief Fujinka, I don't know if you want to, we have to take a break in a short while, but, that of internet integration all over the nation, if that is going to come to play, how's it going to work?
Well, it has worked in other climes. It can work in our own clime. The only thing is the political way to put in infrastructure in place to be able to do that. What I think is that the government has never had a political will to get our electoral process right. And that's why the Electoral Bill, the last Electoral Act was not signed, so that it could create an opening for maneuvers. And that's why it was possible for... Even
though that's not the reason they put forward. But that's what you think is the reason, is it?
That's my reason. That's my take. I share the opinion in the sense that in most places where they say they must use card reader, if you use card reader, it will make the fraud less.
INEC also spoke about us having a conversation about election management in the country. Remember when the election was postponed? This last election was the first time out. But in that vein, first of all, let's perhaps talk about what we need to do to improve our elections. We left off with amending electoral laws, and some thought, well, you suggested that incumbents maybe are not usually favorably disposed to this. But, Honorable, let me take this to you. Now that we have this government will be, by the time they're done in 4 years, they won't be returning. Will there be any reason whatsoever for the elections or the Electoral Act to be presented, the bill, if it's presented to them, will there be any reason for them not to sign this time?
Did I hear you were said after 4 years they won't return?
This government?
Yes.
It's 8-year term, isn't it?
You mean the president?
This president, yes.
Okay, not the party.
Not the party, the president.
Okay. My take is that we should do everything possible in the National Assembly, and we're doing that. I also belong to the Electoral Committee now, INEC Committee. We started looking at the laws again and the bills so we can present it. And we want to start on time, so we can present it, and if there's any objection, we'll keep representing and see if we can, within the 3 years, see what we can do. But like my colleague said, we need a political will to do the needful. We all know...
but the needful will be predicated on the laws.
Then I'm saying we need the political will, for example, to assent the laws. You don't, because of one item on the law, said you would throw all away. Let's start somewhere. It shouldn't be cast on iron. As we practice the law, we'll be able to find more amendments. So we should start somewhere.
So what key recommendations are you looking to add this time around?
One, making INEC more responsible and having the electronics things that will reduce...
What do you mean more responsible? Shifting the burden of proof?
No. For example, the law as we practice now gives INEC a lot of latitude to do whatever they want to do. But what we're trying to do is...
I don't understand whatever they want to do.
For example, we're told, oh, there are going to be electronic transmission, they're not going to be, and money was provided. Then it became optional for them because of lack of...
Was it legal for INEC?
It wasn't legal because electronic voting wasn't part of the law.
So how come they say they can do whatever they want to do?
That's what I'm saying.
They only do what the law permits them.
If it wasn't legal, they will only do... No, the law did not forbid it. But the law did not make it mandatory. And we tried to amend the law to make it mandatory.
But it wasn't signed.
That's what I'm saying. So because of the law we have now, they had a lot of latitude to do what they want to do. That's what I'm saying. Even when we know that only the card can give us a credible, real result. But they decided not to take that option because...
But that was for accreditation purposes, not for transmission purposes.
You won't do over voting if there is accreditation purpose, for example. If the card can say only 500 people presented themselves for voting, you don't have 1,000 results at the end of the day. It's a beginning point. Even if you do not transmit, the card will tell you number of people that came to vote.
But then it goes back to the issue of technology, that were deployed. Some didn't work, some worked, and all of that. So maybe some would say that was a trial period for the...
In the last election, 90% of the cards worked.
So then, if the law had been signed for electronic voting to take effect, would it have been effective?
Yes. If 90% had worked the cards, that is substantial compliance.
Well, you said 90% didn't work.
No, I said 90% worked. In the last election, 90% of the card readers worked. I come from Okwa, Federal Council in Abia State. It worked. Okay. It was used in my own election.
Chief Ojinka.
Yes, and even in that last election, they say where card readers fail, the election will be thrown to the next day, and they produce the card readers. The thing is that, my brothers...
But that happened.
The thing is that the people are frustrating us from getting into electronic process so as to ensure that the process is subject to manipulation.
That was not the reason given by the president for not signing that law. One of the, I'm quoting the Situation Room's election observation report. I said the key reason cited by President Buhari for declining assent to the changes was Nigeria's obligation under Article 2 of the ECOWAS Protocol of Democracy and Good Governance that, quote, no substantial modification shall be made to the electoral laws in the last 6 months before the elections, except with the consent of majority of
the president gave a litany of reasons. He gave the reason for rejecting the first one, and then delayed it until it was a design program, carefully scripted and well executed. He, at each point he gave very flimsy reasons until the time caught up with that proviso, and then they now had to cite that proviso as a reason. But the thing is that we all know that the major reason for non-assent is to allow the process to be subject to manipulations.
Manipulation by who?
By the system.
Please define system.
As we said, during that electoral process, we insisted that there must be card readers to do accreditation, and that we were against the CVS, the continuous voters and accreditation system, where you accredit and you go and vote.
Which has happened before.
Yes, we wanted a system where you accredit. At the end of time, everybody knows the accreditation figures and they are entered into a form, and it's all known, and before you proceed to vote. But because of they said it was the civil society and all the rest of them that other CVS or nothing more, and we know that was the process that the whole thing will be, the whole electoral process will be maneuvered. And that was exactly the process because in the last election, you saw places where that were challenged in terms of security. You saw a lot of votes, rolling out from such places.
Okay. Can we go and compare? Have we done really a how will I put it now, a quantitative analysis, because we have results to show from 2019 elections and results from 2015 elections to actually assess when we did continuous voter, the continuous voter system where people will accredit and vote. Have we been able to compare it with when people, were accredited first and came back later? Have we been able to say, look, this is the figures that came out from, say, Maiduguri at this particular point. These are the figures that came out from Maiduguri in 2019. To be able to say this is actually the major difference we have noticed when people are asked to come back and vote or when people are accredited and voted once. Have we been able to say we have noticed in very concrete terms a disparity in both processes? Have we done that?
Well, until we do that, but from all we saw during this last election, some of the videos were, went viral. Some of the videos we are seeing, in situations where in some little booths you saw people thumb printing and you saw a whole lot of malpractices going on.
Some people say we still saw that in 2015, didn't we?
Yeah.
But we should have improved. We should have improved. 2019 should have been an improvement over 2015.
Let's get a little bit
So are we going backward?
Gentlemen, you heard what Dr. Nanaba, senior advocate of Nigeria, who has been still involved in electoral induction petition cases. That's his perspective. But you were going to respond, Honorable Abonta. Go ahead.
Yes, I disagree with him for example, the composition of the proposed course. Say they will set up panels drawn from outside the states. My own argument is that you can't have the same court. What we are trying to avoid will run into. Will the members of that court come from that state? If yes, then are they going to be independent in what we do in Nigeria? And if they are going to draw them from outside the state, will it also amount to the election petition? I think the point we're missing here is to differentiate in the election issues and the election offenses. How do we prosecute them? I think that's the issue, so that we can deter people from doing that.
Let's talk about this point. What do we do about the conduct of politicians themselves? Because, look, these laws have always been there, even the ones that are currently there now, because there's no law that supports vote buying, but politicians do it.
At all.
So, how do we have to legislate politicians the way they conduct themselves too?
Of course. It's part of the electoral fraud or malpractice, vote buying. But except you're saying we should make specific pronouncements in the law. But it shouldn't be induced. Was it not this country that said for giving somebody funeral rites, he was made to leave office, to drop his ambition of trying to contest. Once he gave $180 to, is it Japan or somewhere? So he was forbidden. So we should do such a thing where erring politicians like me and others should be sanctioned. But here we also see vote buying being promoted in a different name, in all manner of things. That law in quoted that says 6 months to this, you should not do this, is to discourage changing the goalpost. We should also have such that we should introduce programs supposed to say using the public fund recklessly. Let me say so.
Back to the issue of the role that political parties and politicians can play in this. One of the issues that's been of interest to many people is that of funding of elections, especially by political parties. There's the belief that almost all, if not all, parties always go above the threshold that's set by law. How do we address that?
Of course. It is difficult to stay within the threshold given the Nigerian nature.
Why?
For example, I'm coming to tell you. For example, let's say House of Reps didn't spend more than 20 million naira. We agree in practice, that's what we say we did. But you will visit how many wards? I have about 20 wards. You will campaign, you will do your t-shirts, you will do your jingles, you will do the mobility, and then just come talk to them and tell them how wonderful you're going to represent them without dropping the immediate. Nobody's going to talk to each other. This one is not serious.
Isn't that also vote buying?
It is. For example, you don't come
so
to
you
a rally.
buy votes. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying. What I'm saying is you induce people, which is wrong. For example, in America, you may not see a constituent. They watch you on television and you campaign, you tell them, and you do question and answer. They are convinced. Here, you'll be forced to see every parent family and talk.
You'll be forced?
Yes.
Don't you have a choice?
You don't have a choice.
You have a choice.
If you want to fail, don't go. That's the choice.
Yeah, if you go, do you have to, according to you, the immediate? If you don't do that...
When you talk, when you move, you have to charter vehicles, you have to do the musicians, you have to hire a stage, you mobilize and demobilize their crowd. Are they going to trek? It's expensive to campaign.
But Chief, isn't this one of those things that one would say frustrates the electoral process?
Well, my brother, I can tell you that I feel pained. I feel like crying. That at this point in time, you know, all the issues we raised before the last election and all that happened during that election, that the only issue or issues that can come to the front burner at this point in time is talking about the electoral courts. Whereas we have not gotten the process right. It pains me. In fact, I see this call as purely diversionary. You know, to divert people from the real realities on ground. Because we are hoping that by now, the president should be able to, or the National Assembly, we should have a very functional electoral act that would have addressed all the issues that will make our election. There is no way. Chief, other clients, our neighbors here,
Chief, it's a function of the law. You know, what he raised, what the question that's been asked now is about the electoral process, and chief among the actors are political parties and politicians. So if we get that process right, where politicians align with the law, they don't go above the threshold, they don't do what is not expected of them, do we still need to have very, very stringent control measures if everyone who is supposed to play according to the rules?
Let me ask you a question.
No, but definitely everybody will not play according to the rule, and that's why you have control measures to control people who want to go outside the rules.
For instance,
man by nature does not want to obey laws. Man by nature does not want to obey rules. But man is being coerced or forced to obey.
So politicians also have to be forced. So, is that what you're saying?
Of course. There has to be a compelling reason. If not, they will not. So, but at this point in time, you know, that's why we didn't really want to. It's in a country that you travel around the country now, virtually over 90% of our roads infrastructure network is completely gone. It's only in Abuja here that you can, you know, comfortably ply on the roads. In all over the states, you can't ply on roads. Sure. Moving from Abuja to any state, you can't ply on the roads. When you see yourself in such a circumstance that certain things that are very primary, fundamental, people eating, poverty capital, you are talking of, and you compare our recurring budget to that of capital budget, and at that point in time, somebody is talking of what to increase the burden of recurrent again in the country, when we need to put a lot of our resources in infrastructure. Let us get the electoral process right. Let us go. What's stopping them from going into the electronic voting system? By the time we go into EVS, it will reduce completely all this issue of people going to court.
So that's what we're hoping that the National Assembly will eventually address.
1%.
We've done that before. We'll do it again. The question I want to ask you is, if you say you seal 20 million for elections, have you bothered to know what the SN charge as legal fees in the petition? Have you bothered to know? That alone takes off the 20 million naira. I mean, the legal fees. So when they say,
is this in addition, is that included in the electoral?
Of course, it's the election process, election petitions, the election process. It ends with that. The legal fees alone. But they're saying, I had to. So, and you must get that back. So I will not buy justice now because they will hire the best.
I don't know how Chief's party will contest if he can contest elections, because if this are some of the challenges they need to face, I don't know what they will do. But we'll have to end on that note. The Honorable Zoma Bonta is the former chairman House Committee on Public Petitions, also in that committee of INEC in the House, and then Chief Jeff Ojinika, former Deputy National Chair of IPAC. Gentlemen, thank you both for coming on this morning.